Bolivian President Rodrigo Paz has declared a state of emergency, a move that enables him to use military force to end a blockade crisis that has ground the country's economy to a halt. He called the blockades an attempted coup. Now, President Paz announced the move on state television hours after he had struck a deal with the main union, the Bolivian Workers' Confederation. The deal meant union members would leave the streets and not participate in the blockade, which had resulted in critical food, fuel and medicine shortages.
There comes a time when inaction ceases to be prudence and becomes irresponsibility. That time has come. Therefore, having exhausted all avenues for dialogue, having reached agreements with those who had legitimate demands, and having clearly identified those who were using violence to try and destabilise Bolivia, we've taken the decision to declare a state of emergency throughout the country.
Now, the conflict initially erupted after President Paz axed long-standing fuel subsidies, a move made to try and shrink the budget deficit at a time inflation was already spiralling. Now, despite later steps to stabilise fuel prices and reverse unpopular land reforms, protests intensified into much broader discontent, with unions demanding wage increases and an end to fuel shortages and Paz's resignation. Now, protesting groups, many allied to former leftist President Evo Morales, have cut off key roads, stranding trucks and choking supplies of food, fuel and medicines to many areas, including the capital, La Paz. Now, the emergency declaration gives the president more tools to restore order, like sending in the armed forces to clear blockades. Having an agreement with the unions means the blockade is already smaller and weaker, as we say hello to Sergio Mendoza, a journalist in the Bolivian capital of La Paz. Sergio, good to see you again. After 50 plus days of a truly crippling blockade, now the president's declaration of a state of emergency, how has that move been received?
Hi, Anthony. Good morning, and thank you for receiving me, for having me. Yeah, well, it has been surprising, really surprising, because the announcement was made by Rodrigo Paz at 1:30 a.m. today, Saturday. So now we are in 6:30, and it's going to be, I'm sure that a lot of people just are waking up with the news. However, this was a demand, a long time demand from some sectors, especially opposition or business, private business, and actually a big portion of regular citizens that were demanding a state of emergency to be declared to try to get to normal or stabilize the country.
Sergio, what does it mean? Included in the powers that would become available is the use of the military. What are you expecting? Is this going to be a case where we see tanks on the streets of La Paz?
Yeah, well, the decree was made public. It was published on the official social media. And this includes the participation, of course, of armed forces. The military will be deployed and will support the police officers in operations to lift the blockades or to reestablish the order in the country. We have seen very early in the morning on social media videos that some military vehicles were deployed on the capital of La Paz, on the streets. Some individual rights and specific rights are going to be restricted. For instance, the right for protest. Protests are prohibited, are banned. Of course, the blockades that actually were illegal already, according to Bolivian law, but they were all applied anyway. Blockades are going to be banned too. And transit or movement in specific areas could be restricted too, but fundamental guarantees and rights are going to be respected according to this decree.
Sergio, how bad has the situation got to this point?
Yeah, we have been a lot of the government has been insisting a lot on dialogue, on conversations. They had reached agreement with different sectors. The most recently, you mentioned some minutes ago, the most recent agreement was with the labor union, one of the main groups that was protesting and was organizing the blockades. Anyway, despite the blockades have reduced from around 100 to less than 50, still we have been experiencing some shortages. Fuel is not arriving to La Paz City. We have seen, and we are seeing now, long lines outside of gas stations that last for almost a week. Food prices of food have increased very, very high, and there is the people are really upset about this situation. Prices are really high, and it's very difficult to find food and some groceries and supplies.
Yeah, we can see evidence of that on our screens right now, of people lining up, and it turns to pushing and shoving as they wait to get access to food. You mentioned that the union, the main union, were standing down from this. What of the other groups, Sergio, who were driving this blockade? Could you firstly remind us of who the other key players are in this crisis, and if they intend to try and maintain this blockade despite what we've heard about these extra powers for the president?
Yes. There were mainly three groups: the National Labor Union, the La Paz Farmers Federation, Tupac Katari, and coca growers from the Chapari region that are supporters of former President Evo Morales. So the Labor Union has signed an agreement last night. The Farmers Federation, Tupac Katari, is divided. There are groups that are open to start conversations with the government, but there are other groups too that say the blockades are going to spread and are going to be reinforced. And the most clear position probably is the one of the supporters of former President Evo Morales. They say that they are going to spread blockades and they are going to reinforce them, and they are going to insist on Rodrigo Paz to resign, and they are not going to start conversations. So we still see at least two groups, big groups, Farmers Federation of La Paz and Morales supporters, that are insisting on the blockades and insisting on Paz resignation.
Okay, I want to ask you about the influence of the former socialist president Evo Morales on this blockade crisis. But first, let's have a listen to what he had to say just a couple of days ago.
In my view, this is a rebellion by the indigenous movement against the neoliberal model and against the neo-colonial state. As time goes by, the government has moved faster. It has tried to implement it even without authority. In December, it already issued a supreme decree to put the entire neoliberal model in place.
Okay, so how big an influence has the former president been up to now? And given what we just heard, what chance he will now back off and allow the current president to get the country moving again?
Yeah, well, the influence of Evo Morales was mentioned since the beginning, almost since the beginning of the protest by the government and different groups. It was not very clear, and it's not very clear until now that how many resources and how much influence he has had in these movements. Labor Union and Tupac Katari Federation say they are not linked directly with Evo Morales movement, but they recognize that because these supporters of Morales have been backing their mobilizations and their protests, so they have been open to receive some kind of support, at least in numbers of protesters. However, the government say that it's like the main protest and the main mobilization and the reason for this coup is Evo Morales, and he's moving resources from drugs, drug trafficking, illicit sources of money, and they responsabilize Evo Morales as a direct actor. Evo Morales has denied that, but he, of course, as you have listened, he has been backing the blockades and he has been criticizing the government's policy.
Probably important to point out that the blockade has been fierce, it's been comprehensive, but am I also right in saying there has been significant opposition against the blockade?
Yes. Well, a lot of people, it's difficult to quantify and to say probably percentages of portion of quantify the number of people against the blockades, but I would say that most of Bolivians have been criticizing and opposing the blockades because they damage a lot, not just the economy and private business, but people have died. More than 13 people died because they couldn't receive medical treatment. They couldn't reach hospitals. They were with medical conditions, health conditions. The hospitals have been problems with oxygen for critical patients. As I told you before, fuel hasn't arrived to the cities. Food prices have increased a lot. So poor people, medium class people, and private business workers that have lost their jobs, entrepreneurs that have lost their businesses have been criticizing these blockades that is one of the longest that we have in Bolivian history, 50 days.
US President Donald Trump, Sergio, is a supporter of President Paz. Trump was extremely proactive in Venezuela. What role has the US played in this crisis in Bolivia?
As far as we know, because not everything is public, or not everything is made public, the U.S. government has been supplying with food assistance and logistics assistance. Of course, they have expressed their moral support through social media and statements. We don't know, but probably Bolivia is needing military and police institutions are needing, of course, tear gas, non-lethal munition, resources for purchase fuel, moving cars and vehicles. So that would be a great help for Bolivian institutions. And the last news was that the U.S. also signed agreements and with a $20 million agreement with Bolivian government to fight drug trafficking, and they have been also subsidizing fuel for airplanes to move some food by airplane.
So if then the state of emergency powers do help the president and his deal with the union weakens the blockade, if the blockade is broken, then what? What will be the state of Bolivia economically and politically after the blockade?
Well, until now, some organizations have reported economic loss of $3 billion. That is around 6% of Bolivian GDP. The complete disruption of the supply chain, the production of goods. So it's going to be very, very difficult. And we know that, for instance, the state of emergency is going to last 90 days. It can be extended. Hopefully it's not going to be necessary. But also the agreement signed with the labor union is to be reviewed and check if it was complying 90 days. So hopefully it's going to be we are going to have a more stable country, but with a huge economic and social damage. Right. But also could be that complete stabilization is not going to be reaching until some leaders are neutralized, captured, or some kind of agreement, honest agreement can be reached with all these organizations.
Yeah, and all of that as Bolivians wake up to the news of these extended powers to the president. Sergio Mendoza, journalist in the Bolivian capital of La Paz. Sergio, thanks so much. Thanks for getting up so early for us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
There is an awful lot to take in on this story so far. We'd love to know where you think it's going next. Let us know before you go. Till next time.